side by side with the leaders that are changing the world, together with the thinkers that enlighten the stage every year, behind the scenes of the greatest ideas, the intimacy, the adrenaline, the thrill of the world's greatest business gatherings. Management Live, the events that set the executive agenda live. Today on Management Live, the Leadership and High Performance Forum, direct from Sao Paulo, the business capital of Brazil. The latest ideas, best practices and trends that will help identify opportunities and unleash people's potential. The best-selling authors, the global experts and most prestigious academics, Peter Senge, Jeffrey Pfeffer, Bill George, Luis Carlos Cabrera. An event to help you understand how to get full performance through excellence in leadership. Peter Senge, one of the most important specialists of new management trends for the Financial Times and the Wall Street Journal, professor at MIT and the creator of Learning Organization. His books sold more than 1.5 million copies, including The Fifth Discipline, a must-read title in the business community.
All we really wanted to do was understand how the work really gets done. And I found that such a beguiling question. How does the work really get done? Think about that question. Every one of us in an organization, even those of you who aren't from business, I'm almost sure this is probably true. All of you in an organization where we know how the organization is organized. It's in some form of hierarchy. Now, some of the businesses may be some form of a matrix. You know, there's a formal structure. We all know that structure. We have to know that structure. We can't navigate the organization without knowing that structure. How many of you ever watched your organization you work in reorganize? Okay? You've watched reorganizations, right? Only a few. Yeah, come on. There's got to be a lot of hands. Some people say, oh yeah, we've had 5 this year. Right? How many of you have ever found that the reorganizations bring about profound, fundamental, lasting change? Not often. It's sort of like shifting the chairs around, you know? And then now you're facing over here, and before you were facing over here, and now you got to report to somebody new, or you have new people reporting to you, right? But it actually doesn't deal with how the work gets done. See, this is a very interesting question. And she said at the beginning, she said, all we were trying to understand is how does the work really get done? It does not get done by the hierarchy. Almost never. The hierarchy does not get the work done. Now, so you ask, well, what does she mean, get the work done? Well, that's the question. It's not complicated. It's just very subtle and very clear once you start to see it. Great performance has a pattern of feeling, and it's social in its nature. Let me say something up front, because I'm going to use words, I already have started to use words today, like social well-being and social networks. And you noticed her title, Follow the Joy. Their focus was understanding great performance. They were really interested, how do we work when we produce something extraordinary? And how is extraordinary performance, high performance, sustained? Okay? So I just want you to understand that. They were not interested in this being a better club. They actually developed a premise over time, which I think, when I finally started taking it, I said, my goodness, this has been our fundamental core belief forever, but I've never heard it said so clearly. So I'm just going to say it as an assertion now. You'll see how it comes about. That all examples of sustained high performance, now what do I mean by high performance? I mean what people define as high performance. If it's a school, it would be the accomplishments of the students. If it's a business, it would be the success in meeting real customer needs. as well as, of course, the economic benefits of meeting real customer needs. If it were a governmental organization, it would be however people would define what they really care about and want to accomplish, okay? So that's what I mean by high performance. They came to eventually a conviction that all examples of high performance, sustained high performance, only arise by creating high levels of social well-being. You may like it or not, you may be kind of confident what it means or not, just sit with me. You may recognize this name. Ed Deming was famous as the pioneer of the quality management movement. The American who went to Japan, I think the first trip was 1953 or 1954. No Americans were interested in him. The Japanese listened, and within a couple of decades, he was a very famous man in Japan. If you go into the Toyota corporate headquarters, you'll see 3 portraits. Mr. Toyota, the founder, his son Toyota, who ran the business for a long time, and in the middle, a little bit larger, you'll see a portrait of W. Edwards Deming. The Deming Prize became the most revered accomplishment for Toyota businesses. The prize for leadership in quality management, as it was called originally. This is something Dr. Deming used to be very fond of saying. All people, the prime ingredient for achievement of any aim, including quality, is joy in work. He used to often say, all people seek joy in work. Now just pause on that for just a second, because you realize these are very simple statements, but my kind of own reflection is that they contradict deeply held beliefs, like people work only to make money. They work to make money so they can do something with the money outside of work that they care about. I don't know your organization, so you have to see for yourself if this is a valid assumption. You think, yep, a lot of people in my organization, they do believe people only work to make money. They don't really care. They care as much as they need to care. They don't want to lose their job. Certainly not today, they don't want to lose their job. Deming would say that is the first reason that organizations fail to achieve high performance. They fail to achieve high performance because they operate on a belief that people don't really care. He argued that no, all people, all, underlying the word all, seek joy in work. They want to be proud of what they do. They want to do something they think matters. They want to be recognized, but they also want to recognize others. You start to see now the beginnings of this idea of social well-being. This was an example of a study they did at HP. Real simple study. They had a particular problem, part quality problem. It was getting worse and worse and worse. And eventually it got solved, and they studied who worked together to solve the problem. Remember, how does the work get done? How the real work gets done is often not through the organization chart. It's through people working together across all kinds of boundaries. And by the way, that's when that doesn't happen, that's often how the work doesn't get done. With me? So they eventually decided that what they were really starting to study was the nature of collaborative social networks. So let me tell you a little story, and then we'll do the exercise. So they were starting this process, and they were working with the guy, Dennis Sandow, who was the second name on these slides, who was a social network researcher from the University of Oregon. Their headquarters were in Oregon. They were spread around the world. They were looking at work problems around the world. And they were doing these studies of different networks. They started to get quite good, and people were identifying different networks. In other words, in order to do this, who actually had to be involved? We accomplished this. Who were the people who worked together to accomplish it? Okay? And eventually they found this one network, and they looked at it and studied it, and they said, oh my, this person, this person, this person. And they started to come to the conclusion that this one particular network, which again cut across the organization all kinds of different ways, had probably been responsible for about 30% of their key new product ideas in the last 5 years. They said, this is an extraordinary network. This network has had such an impact on our innovations in the last 5 years. Then somebody noticed, but the network, they're all women. It was a network of about 30 people, and they were all women. Now, I think they probably have about 30% women engineers in the company. There's a lot of women engineers there, but they're a little bit of a minority. So this was kind of statistically really odd. You know, how do you have a network of 30 people who are all women? And then somebody said, oh my God, it's the quilting circle. Now, I have to explain here, because I may have used a word that can't be translated very well. So quilting is an old practice in America where people would take little patchworks of old material and they'd knit them together to make like a big blanket, or what was often called a quilt. So it's basically a group of women who met every week, once a week at lunchtime, and they quilted. They knit together. So how does a network like that have such a huge impact on the business? It was a huge puzzle. You can imagine the managers are going, what's going on here? This is bizarre. Then they went and talked to a lot of these ladies, and they said, oh yeah. Well, they all knew each other. They all knew each other very well. Sure, we quilt. Once a week we get together and quilt. What do you talk about? Well, we talk about our kids, and we talk about our work. And of course, we're engineers, most of us, so we talk about our problems. And what they started to realize is all that the quilting circle represented was a group of people who would create a social space where they could just be themselves every week. And then, of course, when certain problems would come up, somebody who was in a division over here or a work team over here knew somebody over here. Well, I think they've done something on that. We can talk to them. And so all of a sudden, networks would start to develop from this crazy quilting circle. It became kind of the metaphor in the company. Creating social well-being, creating high performance. So actually we'll come down to a really simple question. What really matters to all of us? That's the gift of all these sustainability problems. Suddenly the human being is living in the world. The human being is part of the earth process. This has never happened before in human history. We, little tweak, things are changing the planet's climate? Yes. We are part of how the earth functions today. It's our chance to grow up and see what it would mean to live well together. That's all. How can we actually live well all together? Because probably we really don't have any option. So yes, I do think it's a new world order, which is sitting on some core questions. And the Brazilians will have a unique contribution. The Chinese will have a unique contribution. The Indians will have a unique contribution. I'm hoping the Americans will have a unique contribution. It is a question for all of us. So thank you all very much.
Jeffrey Pfeffer, one of Stanford's most prestigious professors, one of the most respected voices for the human resources agenda, author of 11 books, including the bestseller, The Human Equation.
How we think about the world and the language that we use to describe this world affects every decision that we make and affects how we and our companies conduct our business. First of all, we see what we expect to see. Anyone who's ever gone to see a magician understands the truth of that. We see what we expect to see. It is not seeing is believing. It is believing is seeing. Secondly, through our own behaviors, we create self-fulfilling prophecies. If I treat you as if you are an incompetent who cannot be trusted and manage you accordingly, over time you will in fact become an incompetent who cannot be trusted. We know this. If you go to Google or your favorite website and search for the phrase self-fulfilling prophecy, you will see the literally hundreds of studies in contexts ranging from schools to the Israeli army to companies where we see that How we think about things makes them come true because of our behavior. There are studies that began this by looking at how physical attractiveness affects personality. They would do a study. People would talk to someone on the other phone, but they would not know whether that person was actually attractive or not. They'd be shown a picture. When they were shown a picture of an attractive person, they talked to that individual in a very different way than when they were shown an unattractive picture. And that interaction in turn produced different behavior. We see and get what we expect. We make decisions based on our assumptions and theories about how the world works. If you actually think that the key to success is low labor costs and having no workers, you will make decisions accordingly. Which means that knowing the facts and knowing the evidence is absolutely essential to running a successful enterprise. Choose a strategy to compete in the grocery store industry. Do you want to minimize labor costs? Grocery store industry is a low-margin, bad industry, particularly in the United States. In 1990, Walmart began selling groceries. By today, it has a 25% market share. How do you compete? Cut your labor costs by having no people in the store and the people who are there untrained. Cut your product costs by buying huge amounts of product. Or would you staff the store generously and let every store manager, and for that matter, every department manager within a store, stock what they think the local people want to eat? Which looks more successful to you? The average U.S. grocery store industry, which has lower margins, or a company called Whole Foods Markets, which has succeeded by understanding something that no one else has yet figured out. People will pay more for food they want to eat. That may sound obvious to you, but if in fact people will pay more for food they want to eat, then you need to have stock assortments that reflect local tastes. And regional tastes and food preferences vary. Walmart versus Costco. In 2004, the average Costco employee, which is a large warehouse seller of all kinds of merchandise, competing with Sam's Club, paid 39% more, gave a higher percentage of its employees more benefits. Therefore, its labor costs looked higher. Which store do you think was more profitable? How can you make money if your labor costs look higher? It turns out that it doesn't matter what I pay you. It matters what you can do. If I pay you nothing and you do less, my costs are high. Turnover in the first year is less than 1/3 as high as Costco as in Sam's Club. They generate higher sales per square foot from their more skilled and trained and, by the way, longer-term workers. And therefore, their profits per employee are higher. Do not fall into this idea that labor costs equals labor rates and these equal profits. If you want to cut your labor costs, I can tell you how to do it perfectly. Close. On the day you close, your labor costs will be zero. They don't get any lower than that. You are not interested in minimizing your labor rates. You are interested in hiring people who can do things to make your enterprise successful and effective. Why does Toyota outperform General Motors, Ford, and Chrysler? Is it because as many of my friends in the US talk about, Toyota doesn't have all of these retired employees that they have to pay health care and retirement for. Rick Wagoner, who got fired as the CEO of General Motors, would complain about the $1,500 per car cost disadvantage of General Motors over Toyota. It's a true number. Is it because Toyota pays less money? Is it because they're more productive? What is it? It turns out that while the labor cost disadvantage for General Motors was $1,500 per car, General Motors faced a much bigger problem. According to the Harbor Report, which is spelled H-A-R-B-O-U-R, the Bible of the US auto industry, in 2004, Toyota received on average $6,000 more per vehicle sold than General Motors. The problem of General Motors and Chrysler is not labor costs. The problem of General Motors and Chrysler was that they made cars that no one wanted to buy. There's an interesting sequel to the story. When I wrote a column about this recently, I called the Harbor Report, and I said, why have you not updated these numbers since 2004? And the answer was, the U.S. auto industry was so embarrassed by these numbers in 2004 that they have refused to give us the information since then. This is not just ignorance. This is the active cultivation of ignorance. I do not like the answer. I don't want the data. Beware of false analogies. Fight the competition, not each other. Measure what matters. Intermediate outcomes and processes. The most important thing is what leaders do. People are watching you every day. The phrase is called walking the talk. We all know this. We all know this. What matters is what you do as a leader, how you spend your time, how you allocate your time, what questions you ask. If you always ask people questions about costs, they focus on costs. If you ask people, are we taking care of our customers, they will focus on the customers. If you ask people what they are doing to and for each other, they will focus on that. Spend a lot of time and attention thinking about your own behavior, because people look to you. I try to be punctual. Therefore, we're done. Thank you very much.
Bill George, Leadership and Management Professor at Harvard Business School, former CEO of Medtronic, global leader in health technology, board member of companies such as ExxonMobil, Goldman Sachs, and Novartis.
I think it's particularly interesting because in my study of hundreds of leaders who have failed, none of them have failed to lead other people. They failed to lead themselves. If you look at how did these leaders fail, they really went off track themselves and weren't able to deal with their own reality. So let's talk about these 5 things. Self-awareness. How do you get self-awareness? You know, you can't just say, oh, I'm going to be self-aware. You have to get it through experience on the playing field. You have to get in and have that experience where you're really on the line. And the second thing then is you get feedback from people. ML describes when he was failing, he'd missed his budget by $30 million one quarter. It was $120 million. He's getting calls from Jack Welch. Jack Welch wants to take over his relationship with General Electric because ML's running the plastic business, his relationship with General Motors, and they couldn't afford to lose General Motors and the plastics business. And he's getting all this feedback. And then finally he said, you know, at a certain point in time, the third step is you need to be reflective and introspective. How am I going to get through this, and who am I in this crisis? How am I going to come through it? Am I going to hold true to my values? Because Helmut knew he could correct the problem by breaking a lot of contracts, but it would destroy a lot of relationships. So that's when he made this statement, that leadership's a long journey into your own soul. And I think he really meant it's finding out who you are, figuring out who you are as a person. The second thing, we talk about values. Again, I think it's meaningless to stand up here and for you to stand in front of people and say, these are the values we represent as a company. It's even, you know, not so meaningful to practice good values when things are going well. That's pretty easy. When things are going well, just stay on course. What do you do when you think the whole place may come tumbling down? We may fail. There's a great story from Narayana Murthy, the founder of Infosys, who told us a story. He founded this computer services company. It was a very computer software company in India. He'd come back from France, and he founded this company in his early 30s. And Murthy said, you know, I want to build a company that's the most, we won't be the largest in India, but we want to be the most respected company in India. And he said, you know, we're not going to pay bribes. Everyone in India pays bribes. We're not going to do that. Well, the first thing that happened is he had no money. He founded the company on $50 he borrowed from his wife. And he couldn't buy a computer, but he needed a telephone system. And so the guys coming in to install a telephone system said, we need a little money, a little payment here. You know, it wasn't a lot of money, $20 to get your phone system installed. Murthy said no. It's interesting. He waited 9 months to get his phone system. Now, as a business person, you say, that was a crazy decision. Just pay the $20. But he said, we're trying to set a standard for the company to carry on. Today, Infosys has 110,000 employees, and everyone tells that story, that same story, because it kind of set the standard for who they were as an organization. So I think values are something you work on practicing every day, but particularly when you're really under the pressure. The third area has to do with motivations. What really motivates you? No, I think all of us, everyone in this room, likes to have the respect of our peers. We like salary increases. We like to know we're doing well. We like bonuses. We like title increases. I like being a full professor at Harvard Business School, not a senior lecturer at some school you've never heard of. Yeah, those are all extrinsic motivations. Those are all the external things. And the question is, how much do we look outside of our organizations to gain, outside of ourselves to gain motivation? Does that really turn us on? Are we chasing great newspaper stories? Well, there's nothing wrong with those things, but I think they need to be balanced by your intrinsic motivation. What really matters to you in life? At the end of the day, what are you going to say was important? That you followed your values, that you built a great organization, you created products and services, you helped a customer, you helped people, you made their lives better, you helped mentor someone helped you, you led a good family life and you raised a family. Those are all your intrinsic motivation. I'm not saying get rid of the extrinsic, I'm saying just keep a balance between the intrinsic, the internal, and the extrinsic, the external. But then, if you can put your greatest, if you know your motivations, you know what really turns you on, and you put that together with your greatest capabilities. In the old days, we talk about people's weaknesses. I think today the key is thinking about what are our strengths, and do I have a job where I use my greatest capabilities? Because I'll guarantee you, if you can put together your motivations and your strengths into a single job, it's what we call your motivated capabilities. That's your sweet spot. That's a sweet spot and you can operate. Are you in that sweet spot now? You know, it's like if you're a great soccer player in the goal, you're not going to make a great striker, do you? But are you really motivated to play that position and do it extremely well? Are you motivated to do your job well, and does it play to your strengths? Because if it does, you'll do really well. Not only that, if you can get the people in your organization each in the right position, so they're highly motivated by your work, by their work, by your work, and they're really good at what they do, you'll have a highly successful organization. Well, the fourth area has to do with building a support team around you. You know why? Because leadership is very lonely. It can be very lonely. When you feel like the buck stops with me, I'm the court of last resort, I got to make this decision. Everyone's arguing back and forth, I got to make the decision. It can be very lonely. Who do you turn to? Who do you turn to? I like to think, I'll tell you who I turn to. I turn to my wife, Penny. We've been married now, we're having our 40th anniversary this fall. And Penny's always there for me. She's a great counselor. She's there to support me when I'm down. I tell her enough about the business so she feels like she's engaged in it. And if I get too high on myself or start going off track or worry more about the externals, she kind of pulls me back to ground center. I think it's also really important to form a support team where you have mentors. That you have a mentor, a coach, someone who's not your direct supervisor, someone probably outside the organization, could be inside, but maybe outside, that can give you good coaching and good advice and counsel. The third thing I have that's a great benefit to me, I have a men's group I've been meeting with now for over 30 years, every Wednesday morning, but we meet and talk about life. We talk about the really important things of our life. There's 8 of us, typically 6 on a morning, and we'll talk about really important things in life, and if we have a difficulty, we can share it. So who can you really talk to? And I think it really helps to have, if you will, a support group, a group of people that you can share who you are, that probably you don't work with, that you're not competing with, people outside that you can really turn to, because we all need that level of support. Well, the fifth thing, it's interesting, this is the young generation, this is all they want to talk about these days, is can I have a successful home life and a successful work life? Can I do both? The question is, how can you lead an integrated life with all these pressures? And so I think what we really look for is that sense of integrity in your life. You can be the same person. Can you honestly say that you're the same person at work, at home, in your community, and in your personal life? I can tell you earlier in life I was anything but that same person, because I was trying to get ahead at work, I was trying to be Mr. Laid Back at home. But you know, I think if you can do that, then you can say you're living your life with integrity and you have an integrated life. Because I think if you know, people talk about working 100 hours a week, you can't sustain that. So I think you'll actually be a better leader if you have that kind of sense in your life that you're fulfilling all aspects of your life. People that just work probably won't make good judgments and make good decisions, particularly in leadership roles, because it's not just about time work, it's how you do all these things. Well, all of those things, if we can build the self-awareness, if we can practice our values, if we can work in our sweet spot of our motivations and our capabilities, our motivated capabilities, if we can build a support team around us and we can build an integrated life, then we're ready to become great leaders of people. So I think in the end of the day, what leadership to get performance today, it really means that you can empower people to step up and lead throughout your organization. And I will guarantee you that an organization of highly empowered people will outcompete an organization that's hierarchical from top to bottom every time. Well, I hope you'll use your leadership to be a very fulfilling thing. I found it the most fulfilling thing in my life to take on really tough challenges, get knocked down, work with a group of people, use their capabilities to figure out tough problems, come together around that, and you know, when you can win the game, there's no better feeling. There's no better satisfaction in seeing people now and say, you know, we really made a difference through our work. That to me is the most fulfilling thing, and I hope you'll find that fulfillment of leadership, whether it's in a crisis or whether it's in a good times, that through your own leadership, you can really make a difference in the world. Thank you very much.
Luis Carlos Cabrera, renowned professor of human resource administration and career management, one of the most prestigious headhunters in Brazil, founder of Panelli Moda Cabrera, a pioneer company in top executive search.
Durante muitos anos eu estava cometendo o seguinte engano conceitual. Eu achava que o comprometimento nascia da nossa identidade, da identidade de valores. Eu acredito nessas coisas, você acredita nessas coisas, o que nós combinamos está resolvido. Mas não era assim que funcionava. Até que eu assisti uma palestra de um dos mais jovens doutores de Harvard, que não ficou em Harvard, está na London Business School, chamado Donald Su. E estou eu assistindo a palestra do jovem Donald Su, quando ele diz o seguinte: o comprometimento não nasce de uma conversa, nasce de uma ação. Eu falei, puxa. E ele dá um exemplo, ele fala assim, não há na história da humanidade nenhuma negociação que não tenha sinal. Lá atrás, nos fenícios, ele mostra todo o desenvolvimento comercial, todas as relações de comprometimento nasciam de um sinal. Mas não era um sinal. Era um sinal. Era um sinal de bens, era uma ação. Muitas vezes a gente diz ao subordinado, eu espero que você se comprometa, ele espera que você tome uma ação nessa direção. O comprometimento não nasce da conversa. A conversa é o bom preâmbulo, mas ele nasce de uma ação. Quer comprometimento? Tome as ações que derivam comprometimento. Tome as ações que geram comprometimento. Por isso que a gente fala em Construa uma relação liderando pelo exemplo. Nenhuma novidade. Vários dos nossos apresentadores anteriores falaram disso com propriedade. Muito bem. Terceiro componente. Aí é que vem a história do culturalmente aceito. A minha experiência como contratador de executivos, principalmente pelo fato de eu trabalhar muito na contratação de presidentes, ela mostra que a inadequação de um presidente, quando ocorre, raramente é por performance. Constantemente é uma inadequação cultural. Daí é que eu estou colocando no líder sustentável, além do resultado, além do socialmente correto, o culturalmente aceito. Esse cultural, ele está com esses detalhes. Primeiro, dos valores. É o eixo central da cultura e é em torno do qual você faz as mudanças. O melhor conceito de valores eu aprendi com um velho mestre, companheiro, foi sócio durante um período, chamado Flávio Rego Freitas de Toledo. O professor Flávio Toledo dizia o seguinte: é muito fácil entender valores. Os valores, eles mostram a maneira pela qual você lida com a vida e faz seus julgamentos. Então, se você me diz que um dos valores que você traz da sua família é a honestidade pauta a maneira pela qual você lida com a vida e você faz os julgamentos. Quando você diz que acha uma pessoa desonesta, você aplicou nela um julgamento baseado no seu valor de honestidade. Falei, puxa, entendi. Então, os valores, eles mostram como nós lidamos com a vida e como nós fazemos um julgamento. É claro que se tivesse um sociólogo aqui de plantão, daria uma definição de 12 páginas, mas aqui eu entendi foi essa. Por isso que eu quero compartilhar. É assim, é a maneira pela qual eu lido com a vida e faço meus julgamentos. Muito bem. Aí, valor para ser valor tem que ter operacionalização. Se eu volto a te entrevistar e pergunto, me fala um valor da sua família, e você diz assim, na minha família, educação é um valor. Eu vou falar, então me conta uma história. E aí você vai me contar a história do seu tio mais velho, que se sacrificou pelos irmãos, ele não estudou, mas ele fez com que todos estudassem. Você vai contar uma outra história de um primo, que fez um esforço danado, prestou 4 vestibulares para poder entrar numa escola pública, porque não tinha recursos. Estas histórias que a gente chama de operacionalização. Quando eu pergunto para você qual é o valor, quando você me responde e não tem uma história, ele não é um valor. Ele é uma crença. Um dia vai ser valor. Quando você for testado, quando você for provado, quando você tiver uma história. Então isso é muito interessante porque quantos de vocês já viram alguém chegar assim, estamos mudando os valores da nossa empresa? Tem cara que quer comprar, eu queria comprar assim, um conjunto de valores para a gente poder distribuir entre os nossos colaboradores. Não existe isso. O valor, ele contém histórias, eles vêm de geração para geração e são compartilhados entre contemporâneos. Mas tem que ter a história, e a história é que operacionaliza. Então você pode dizer o seguinte, os valores não mudam? Mudam com muito tempo. Mas a modernização da operacionalização eu posso agilizar. Pense o seguinte, 60 anos atrás, eu faço uma pesquisa e descubro que esta empresa é uma empresa que tem um profundo respeito pelos seus funcionários. Qual é a operacionalização? Ela registra todos em carteira e paga em dia. Pô, 60 anos atrás, isso daqui é respeito ao funcionário. Hoje, o mesmo respeito ao funcionário não pode ser operacionalizado dessa forma. Eu tenho que criar outras condições modernas de operacionalização. Não é que o valor mudou, o valor é o mesmo. Então, pegamos esse conceito dos valores, lido com a vida e faço o meu julgamento. Precisa ter historinha, precisa ter operacionalização, precisa ser compartilhado, precisa vir de geração para geração. Os valores da empresa normalmente começam com os valores ou do fundador ou dos seus fundadores e do seu grupo natural. Historicamente é assim. Todos vocês olhem para suas empresas, os valores vêm lá dos fundadores. E foram colocados em prática pelo fundador ou fundadores e seu grupo natural. Sabe o que é grupo natural? Só rapidamente é assim. Os fundadores das empresas, quando montam sua primeira equipe, ela não é uma equipe orientada por competência. Ela é orientada por afinidade cultural. Os fundadores, quando montam seu primeiro grupo de trabalho, montam com pessoas de confiança, que significa que têm os mesmos valores, que, frente à vida, fazem os mesmos julgamentos, lidam da mesma forma com a vida. Por isso que, mais tarde na vida daquela empresa, ela trocar esse grupo, que chama grupo natural, em volta do fundador, é um enrosco, porque todos eles têm uma afinidade brutal com os valores da empresa, mas começam a não ter a performance necessária. E é um dos momentos mais críticos na transição de uma empresa familiar, é quando ela tem que trocar os primeiros colaboradores que eram do ciclo natural do fundador. Passam de geração para geração, modernizam-se na sua operacionalização. Então, tomo doutor em valores. E estes valores é que me ajudam a conduzir o processo de transição, um processo de mudança, um processo de crescimento. Eu peguei um exemplo, só para ver a diferença entre o conceito e a prática, né? Uma empresa que eu admiro muito é a 3M. Uma empresa sempre inovadora, uma empresa que cresce a taxas que são suportáveis, é economicamente viável. Você não escuta falar em crises da 3M, ela trabalha a inovação, trabalha o crescimento. E quando ela fala no valor patrocinar a inovação, proteger a criação individual, ela põe aquilo em operacionalização. Porque um dos graves problemas que destroem o conceito de valor na empresa é a falsa operacionalização. Aqui não, são exemplos típicos. Ela tem um jeito de patrocinar a inovação. Está na forma da remuneração. Está no desenho da organização. Quantos de vocês já não foram visitar a empresa de algum amigo que diz assim, aqui o nosso respeito ao funcionário nós mostramos aqui pela caixa de sugestão. Quando fizer isso com você, fala assim, vamos abrir essa aqui? Você vai notar que já cria um frisson. Aí abre. A primeira que está lá tem 8 meses que está dentro da caixa de sugestão. Eu falei, e o que vocês fizeram com isso? Não, a gente recolhe periodicamente. Eu falei, quando? De ano em ano? Então é assim, não é pendurou a caixa de sugestão, você está operacionalizando o valor. Ele tem que ter significado, ele tem que ter consistência. Cada vez que você faz isso, você desgasta a sua imagem, desgasta a qualidade da liderança. Ser um líder sustentável não é complicado. Ele exige de você coerência, exige foco no resultado, ações socialmente corretas, culturalmente aceitas, ambientalmente adequadas, um modelo mental global. Mas é tudo viável, vocês estão muito próximos disso. Só falta um pequeno esforço. E esse esforço da sua vontade é que vai transformar a sua vida numa biografia muito boa de ser contada. Um grande abraço. Obrigado.
Side by side with the leaders that are changing the world, together with the thinkers that enlighten the stage every year, behind the scenes of the greatest ideas, the intimacy, the adrenaline, the thrill of the world's greatest business gatherings, Management Live, the events that set the executive agenda.